All right, cool. All right, well, welcome everybody. If you feel hungry, please just, and for those of you that haven't been here before, bathrooms are out that door and to the right. My name is Mike Devlin. I'm with Keller Williams Realty, Cupertino. There's the Michael Devlin Group. Suzanne and I work together and others. And this is let me get back to it. This is a seminar, and we're partnering with Chase Bank. Jody's going to be talking a little bit about loans. Hi, everybody. And this is about finding a Silicon Valley home and getting a winning offer, right? We're going to talk about what's sort of going on in the market. Let me start with this. Those of you that are here, is this what you've come to hear about? Is there anything specific you would want to make sure I talked about, or you feel cheated? Anything? Don't everybody blurt it out at once. This, right? This is the audience participation part. Okay? All right. So how about this? I'll talk about what I want to talk about, and if you have questions, we'll go from there. I just want to make sure. All right. And the important part here, I think, is presenting a winning offer. Right? There's two parts of this: finding the home and actually being able to buy it once you've found it. The process is relatively simple. I would assume that if you're willing to take time off on a Saturday morning, especially a nice Saturday, and come to, something like this, you're somewhat serious about buying a house, right? I would assume that's true. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time on why now might be a better time than waiting, but we'll get to that in a minute. The first thing you have to do in order to make this work is you have to make a commitment to buy a house. And what that means is you have to sort of be all in. We're not in the hobby, I'm going to buy a house kind of real estate market, right? In other words, you have to have everything ready, you have to be motivated, and you have to be willing to act. We're going to determine what you can afford. Jody's going to talk about that. Your wants and needs, the home search offer, inspections. I'm going to talk about that because some of what is a normal process is not happening anymore in Silicon Valley. Right? It's not just happening. And by the way, my background is just a quick, I've been in real estate a little while. I was the vice president of the largest Century 21 group in Silicon Valley for 20 years. I've been in real estate more than 30 years. I know that seems hard to believe given my youthful appearance, but why is that? People think that's funny. I don't know. But, and so I've seen the market go through ups and downs, including markets that were about this crazy before. There are a lot of reasons for buying rather than renting. You're going to pay your mortgage rather than somebody else's mortgage. You can paint it any way you want to. You can do stuff to it that you can't do. One of the reasons that the market in Silicon Valley and elsewhere is so hot, and by hot I mean hot if you're a seller, the reason why this has been a seller's market is to a large extent because it's been a good time to buy a house, right? You understand the reason it's a good time for people to sell their house is also because it's a good reason to buy the house. And one of the things you have to look at is what's happening to interest rates. Right now they're over 4.5. 45 days ago it was 3.5. And by the end of the year it's projected to be 5. Every time the interest rate goes up 1%, it lowers your purchasing power as a buyer, assuming you're getting a loan, by 10%. And the reason is because lenders use ratios. So a typical ratio might be 40%. And so what a 40% ratio means is that if you make $10,000 a month, 40% of that can go to a mortgage payment. That's $4,000. If interest rates go up, does your income go up automatically? How many of you have an employment relationship where as inflation goes up or interest goes up, your income automatically goes up too? Anybody have one of those? I don't know anybody that has one of those. So just because it's okay to sit up here, I don't spit as much as I used to just saying that so as interest rates go up, your income doesn't go up and the ratios don't change, right? You understand? But the amount of the $4,000 that can now go to principal and the amount that goes to interest shifts. So what happens when interest rates go up 1%, for the same mortgage payment that would have bought you a $1 million house, you can now buy a $900,000 house. Same mortgage payment. you've lost $100,000 in equity when interest rates go up 1%. When they go up 2%, you understand now you're buying an $800,000 house for the mortgage payment that would have bought $1 million house. Is there a difference between the condition and location of $800,000 homes compared to $1 million homes? Is there, right? You understand? So now you're having to compromise even more. So one of the things that's been fueling the market with buyers is interest rates are still low, right? The average historical interest rate since the 1970s is about over 7%, right? I'm just saying, right? And just saying. And is rent going down? Is rent dropping every year? Right? Rent. So in other words, one of the issues about waiting too long is that it's not getting better. Right? And although you can read about bubbles, we'll talk about that. Silicon Valley is in a different world, right? And I'm going to share, isn't that right? We're different, aren't we? So a little bit about what's happening in our market. This, by the way, these numbers are for March 2018, right? So I ran them like last night because I don't have a social life. And I updated the charts. There's still going to be a little bit added in, but for a single family home, it was in March of 2018 for Santa Clara County. This is including single family homes, condos, and townhomes. Notice I've divided them up. The median price in 2018 was $1.457 million. Single family home, March of 2018. Last year it was $1,130,000. Right, for the same time period. You can see that townhomes are at 1.2 and condominiums at 770. That's March 2018, right? This month, that's where we're at so far. This is about the Santa Clara County statistics. The estimated home median price is $1.19 million. For California, it's $528,000. For the United States, it's $229,000. This is why reading national or even statewide articles about the real estate market is not going to give you a very clear picture of what's happening here, right? Look at this number. The estimated value change in the last 12 months was 22%. Went up 22%. And you're going to see that changes based upon whether it's a condo, a townhome, a single-family home, or for that matter, which city and zip code you're looking at. We're building a lot more homes. So there are a 41% increase in building permits being issued in Santa Clara County. And notice that's, although it's only 2% for the state. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but any vacant scrap of land, they're building homes on it. I don't know if you've noticed that, right? If they can build, they are. Now, the median price by city, Monte Sereno, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, Palo Alto, you can see are up there. And I just wanted to go through because you're going to see how this starts to match up later when we look at where people are getting the most and where people are moving to. Gilroy, Morgan Hill, San Jose are the lower median price cities. So one of the things to think about is I can afford a home about this. Where would I be? Well, that kind of gives you, an idea. The median price, I think I did this just to show the increase. This is the same chart, although it looks better than the one before. It was late. So how many sales closed in May of 2018 compared to, March of 2018 to March of 2017, you might have heard that we're not selling as many homes. And that's not really true, right? The reality is, and this was true for February as well, more single-family homes sold in March and February of 2018 than March and February of 2017, right? Actually, more homes were sold, single-family homes. The issue is they weren't on the market very long, right? You understand? That's the big difference. They're not on the market very long, but in order for them to be sold, somebody had to list them, right? So they're being listed, but then they're just being bought. It went down a little for condominiums and townhomes. By city, San Jose, of course, is the big dog, but Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, Los Gatos, Palo Alto, Mountain View, I guess you can understand that block of cities is where a lot of the closed sales are happening. I can see you're all excited by that. And that's another one that looked like the other one. Zip code. This will be a little bit fun. I looked at where most of the people are buying by zip code 95123. Does anybody know where that zip code is?
No.
Blossom Valley is what that would be referred to. Blossom Valley, Oak Ridge Mall, right over there. 95125 is, I thought I heard somebody say this one, Willow Glen. 95020. Anybody know what zip code that is? Gilroy. Gilroy, number 3 zip code in Santa Clara County for number of homes sold. 95124. See, Cambrian Park. Seeing who's got the aptitude to be a real estate agent. I'm recruiting to. 95051. Santa Clara. Santa Clara is one of the cities where we're seeing a lot of sales. 95037. How about that zip code? Anyone know? Morgan Hill. Notice that Morgan Hill and Gilroy now are showing up in the top 10 zip codes in Santa Clara County, right? And partly that's because the sales price is less in those areas. They're more affordable. One of the phenomenons we're seeing is people are moving further away, right? Because the prices go down. I live in Morgan Hill, by the way. We have a Caltrain station. Just saying, right? Just saying. 95136. Thank you, guys. This is called the Guess the Zip Code class. That's also Blossom Valley. 95008 is Campbell. 94087, what? Sunnyvale. 032.
Los Gatos.
Los Gatos. Milpitas. 95127 is Alum Rock. 95014 is Cupertino. 95050, another Santa Clara zip code. And 95070 is Saratoga. Right, so that rounds off where people are buying, and you can see with the chart, and sometimes it's gone up and sometimes it's gone down over last year. Now this we're going to talk a little bit more about this concept when we talk about writing an offer, but how much more than the property was listed for did the seller actually get? Look at the number one, look at that, Sunnyvale. People are getting over 120% of what they're asking for when they sell a house in Sunnyvale, right? See that how much that has shot up since last year. Does anybody know why more people want to buy in Sunnyvale? Google and Mountain View is look at the difference between last year and this year in terms of what people are getting. That's about 20% over. Santa Clara is almost 20% over. Now notice down here, Morgan Hill and Gilroy, these numbers would still be considered strong in a normal market. However, is considered soft when you're looking at Sunnyvale and Morgan Hill. I mean, if you're looking at Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Mountain View, and those areas. So this will come into how we strategize when we're writing an offer, right? These are things we need to understand in the particular market that you're buying a home. How is it acting? And it might be acting very different than other zip codes in other cities. What was the price range? Most of the homes that sold in Santa Clara County were between $800,000 and $1 million. There were some below that. There was a good group above it. Price per square foot, most people got between $400 and $600 a square foot. There's some that are getting over $1,200 a square foot, right? And again, this varies a lot by zip code. And although everybody's house is unique, they'll all tell me that. People are generally getting a certain range of dollars per square foot per zip code or per neighborhood, right? You understand there's sort of a range that people are able to get. How big are the homes that are being sold? By the way, you have a copy of these handouts plus more than you probably wanted to know in some other material, but the size of the homes between 2,200 and 2,400 square feet is where most of the homes that are selling for. I don't know if you like data, I got data. And most of the homes, the biggest group, are between 40 and 50 years old.
Mike?
Yes.
Where did we get those? Where did you get those pamphlets? The slides?
That's probably in your packet.
Oh.
or you snuck in and you didn't, you got past Suzanne.
Oh, no, I
So,
didn't get.
all right, so anyhow,
Nothing.
if you give Suzanne $5, she'll give you, everybody else pays. Everybody else pays $5.
Got
They
it.
don't believe, I don't know why people don't believe you, but anyhow, you can just, you can pick one.
20% over asking price.
What?
20% over listing price.
Right, depends on where you are. Most of the properties are 3 bedrooms. And now we're talking about the fun stuff. How would you actually get an offer accepted in this market? Well, first of all, you have to find the house. And many people rely on Zillow, which has, issues, right? We'll talk about that. According to surveys done by the National Association of Realtors, they asked buyers who bought homes, how did you find the home you bought? And the largest group said, I found it myself on the internet. That was 52%. But over 30%, 34% of the time, the agent actually found the home for the buyer, right? So although many people think that what they're looking at using their apps and things like that is actually showing them all the property that's for sale, not necessarily. And also what we can do is new homes, right? We have access to all of the, are you,
Can you just say if anyone didn't get one of these, I can give you one? Anyone?
all right, only one got past you. So one of the things we look at when we're helping somebody find a home is we look at new homes that fit their price range. We look at for sale by owners that fit their price range, distressed properties, people that have defaults, notices of default that are in pre-foreclosure. And one of the big services we can provide is targeted off-market sellers. So recently we have a client who wants to buy a condominium in Saratoga. It's very particular in terms of where in Saratoga, right? Because there's other family members and the kids, and they have to be within a certain number of miles. There are no homes, no condominiums in Saratoga that fit that definition that you're going to find on the MLS or any of that. There are none. So we did an outreach program to everybody who had a condo in Saratoga that could possibly work for this person, and we found 3 people willing to sell their homes, right? 3. So if all you're doing is waiting for something to show up on Redfin or Zillow and then look at it at the open house, you are probably not going to get a good deal on a home in Silicon Valley. I'm just saying, right? Because the home is maybe not even for sale, right? And so part of our job is to find somebody who wants to sell it.
What is FSBOs?
FSBO stands for a for sale by owner. Thank you for asking. So most for sale by owners work with real estate agents. All the new home builders work with real estate agents. And we go and look for those as well. What about Zillow? What do you mean? I got Zillow. I have a friend who likes to refer to Zillow as the MLS. According to studies that have been done comparing Zillow's inventory to the MLS inventory, they find that Zillow has 79% of all the active listings. 79% of all the active listings are actually on Zillow, right? They're missing 1 out of every 5 homes that's for sale. Plus, they found that 34% of all the homes on Zillow are actually not for sale at some point or another. Now, why? People often ask me, why would Zillow do that? Let's say you want to buy a hat, and there are 2 websites that sell hats. And one website says we got 400 hats, and the other website says we have 700 hats. Which website do you go to? The one that has the bigger number, right? So Zillow likes to be able to say they have more homes on Zillow than Trulia or Realtor.com or anyone else. That's true. They're just not for sale, right? That's true. So using Zillow, is not necessarily the way to find it. And there have been times where 9 days after a home was listed, it still wasn't on Zillow, right? Because it's a syndication thing, and they're syndicating stuff from all over the place, and sometimes they miss stuff. Our search engines update every 15 minutes, right? And if you're serious about buying a home, that's a long time to wait, 15 minutes. Also, this is sort of in the false advertising. If you go to Zillow and you see pictures of real estate agents next to the listing, you might be thinking, "Ooh, that's the listing agent." No, that's not. That's not the listing agent. That's the agent who paid Zillow the most money for the ad, right? But those people that you see on Zillow are not the listing agent. Right? They're just advertisers, but they make it appear so that you'll call them. That's how Zillow makes money. Right? Even though when you call them, they're going to say, well, that house isn't actually for sale. And if you're thinking, I'm going to use Zillow to figure out what the property is going to be worth, let me just say this. The CEO of Zillow last year sold his house for $100,000 less than Zillow said it was worth. Right? $100,000 less. Zillow says that they're within 5% of the actual price 33% of the time. And they're within, this is from their website, and they're within 10% of the sales price about half the time, right? About half the time. And this sort of shows a breakdown about their accuracy, and it's some accurate, but in our general area, the median error is about 5%, right? Using Zillow as a, now I know what to offer. I know what this house is worth. It doesn't, Don't everybody keep blurting out questions. All right. The other thing, so one of the things, if you want to get the best deal you can when you're buying a house, the first thing is you've got to look at all the homes that are actually for sale that fit your criteria, not wasting your time looking at homes that aren't for sale, right? If you could see everything that fit your needs, you would have a much better chance of getting where you want to be. The second thing you need to do is get pre-approved, and not pre-qualified, and not sort of pre-approved, but really pre-approved. And most sellers will not even look at an offer unless there's a pre-approval letter of some sort. Now, if there are two offers, and one of them is from a buyer, they're both for $2 million, and one of them is a pre-approved buyer, and one of them is not a pre-approved buyer, but I'm going to get pre-approved really soon, which one would the seller take? They would take the one that was pre-approved. If you're the non-pre-approved buyer, but I'm going to get pre-approved right away, how much more would you have to offer in order to get the seller's attention and maybe cut you some slack to see if you can do it? Would you think 5,000 would do it on the two? How about 50,000? Maybe not even that, 100,000, right? Do you understand? If you're weak when it comes to this, you're going to have to be offering a whole lot more money, or they're not even going to look at you. Also, what the quality of the pre-approval is important. I'll tell you what happens. We're in a multiple offer environment, so we get 10, 20 offers, one of our 28 offers, and we make piles of the contracts, right? The first pile is, we don't really even need to look at this pile. And then there's these guys are sort of warm, but we're not going to, and then there's the pile. Right, the pile of the people that have the best offers. And the last one I was doing that, we're looking at them, and one of the offers was from a lender. I know the loan agent. It's a company you've all heard of, and it was a 3-page long pre-approval letter. The second one was an offer that was actually for a little bit more, and it was an internet lender. And they had printed the pre-approval letter off of the internet, and it actually had, I'm not making this up, a cartoon on it, right, from the website of the lender. And the pre-approval was about a paragraph long with a cartoon, right? Guess which offer we took? The one from a real lender. So if you go on the internet searching for all of the cheap loan options to shave 1/8% off the interest rate, and you end up with what looks like a weak approval letter from a lender no one has ever heard of, this may keep you from buying a house, right? And it's going to cost you money. Back in the old world, which was 7 years ago, what buyers would do is they would make an offer, and the offer would be accepted, and then there was a period of time for them to get the loan process done. Right? We don't do that anymore. What we want, what the sellers expect, is that you've done all this before you make an offer. What that means, if you were to ask under the old system, when would the buyer remove the loan contingency? We'll talk about contingency soon. When would that actually happen? And the answer is once it went through underwriting and the underwriter had blessed it. It's Easter tomorrow, anyhow, blessed it, right? You understand? And when the underwriter says their chant and blesses it, I think that's what they do, and they move it into the accepted pile, then we would remove the loan contingency. If you're making offers on homes and you have not gone through this process, you're taking an enormous risk. You understand? You're taking a huge risk because you may end up not closing or losing your deposit, right? Anyhow, this will save your money, right? It should be from a trusted source. It should be a real pre-approval. It means it should have gone to underwriting. Good agents know the difference between a one-paragraph pre-qual that's been changed to pre-approval letter versus a real pre-approval, which has conditions and other things in it. You should act fast. Don't wait for the open house. Right? Don't wait. If all you're doing is going on the weekend and visiting open houses, you're unlikely to get a good deal. Right? Because the motivated people, as soon as it hits the market, their agent goes and looks at it, says, yes, this one is good. They go look at it that day. And even if it says we're not taking offers till next Tuesday, we make something called a preemptive offer, right? Where we ignore the instructions, we go ahead and make an offer and see if we can wrap it up before it actually hits the bidding time, right? If you get countered, don't think about it. Because while you're thinking about it, I'll tell you what we do. There's two ways in which you can get countered if you make an offer. One is a single counter, which we don't see as much. The other one is called a multiple counter. And so what will happen is that a multiple counter means the seller is countering more than one offer at once. And it says multiple counter offer. So let's say the counter offer, the multiple counter offer is 1.2 million. What I'll sometimes will have my clients, I'll convince them to do is to counter that counteroffer for 1.2 million and add something to it. In other words, raise the price. Because what may happen is everybody's going to accept that price except us. We've raised the price. And that is more likely to get the property. And if you're thinking about your counteroffer and somebody comes back and raises the price, they're going to take it. They'll cancel all the other, and you didn't get it. The concept, this is what I ask clients. How bad do you want to buy this house? I mean, really, how bad do you want to buy this house? Cut in the middle, woman or man, rather than cutting them out. Having your own agent, by the way, there's a growing number of real estate agents, especially those that have a lot of business, who, if they list the home, will not represent a buyer on that same home. It's a growing number. There's actually, if you Google search this, you'll find court cases involving this particular issue. And that answers the question I was going to ask you, but I already answered it. Why will some agents that have listed the home not represent a buyer on the home? And the answer is because the chances of them getting sued goes up a lot. Think of it this way. If you were going to get divorced, would you use the same attorney your spouse was using? Just to save money, right? How about that? Your spouse says, hey, you don't need to get your own lawyer. We can just use mine. Does that sound good? Right? And the problem is there's a conflict of interest. And one of the Sprint who did the study when they were relocating people, and what they looked at was just this. If the buyer had their own agent versus if the buyer worked with the listing agent, what was the difference in what they paid? And they found on average it was 5% more. 5% more by using the listing agent rather than having your own agent. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So even if you're thinking, well, if I use the listing agent, maybe he'll credit me back some of the commission and look at all the money I'm going to save, and you might be paying $100,000 more for the house than you would have otherwise. Right? What else? Search below your maximum price. In March, sellers got 13.3% on average over list price. One house in March got $1,120,000 more than they listed it for. Right? It was listed at 4 something and went up. It went 26. However, another house that was listed for $998 also it sold for 1.7. I'll talk about this in a minute, and that was 72% over list. This is what, and I have to admit I've done this myself. Right, I listed a home on Hamilton in Santa Clara for $998. I think I did $999,888, and I knew the seller had to have over 1.1 or they wouldn't sell. But I listed it for $999,888. Can anybody understand why I would do that if the seller had to have over $1,100,000?
Bidding war?
A bidding war. Right? It was like anthills on the open houses, right? People were crawling over each other to get to it because it was under $1 million and everybody's looking at, oh my God, this could be a really good deal, all right? So that game is being played a lot these days, where it's not that this agent had no idea, although I don't think they had any idea it would go that high, right? But you understand, it's not that they had no idea, they were deliberately listing it at a lower price. Having said that, there was a home that was listed for almost $8 million that sold for $998,000 under list price, right? So that problem with the averages is that they're just average, right? If the room is really, really hot and then the air conditioning goes on and it's really, really cold and we average the temperature, it might seem comfortable, but it's never comfortable. Right, you understand it's either really, really hot or really, really cold. So you're going to see people generally aren't getting 13% above. This is a mistake people make. They think, well, if the average is 13% above list price, I'm going to just take the list price and add 13%. It's not that easy because sometimes it's 20% over and sometimes it's 20% under. Right, and so you have to actually know what's happening in that market in order to know how to structure the offer. You understand what I mean by if your maximum is 1.2 and you're looking at 1.2, you probably won't be able to buy anything because the people listing at 1.2 are expecting more than 1.2. I've actually had clients where the offer came in $100,000 over list price and they were unhappy. I'm like, oh my God, this is a terrible thing. They got only because they were expecting more. I can see you're all excited by that.
So that significant deviation was just driven by the bidding war?
Part of it's driven by bidding war, and part of it is a deliberate strategy by listing agents to underprice the homes in order to create more of a frenzy. A deliberate strategy. And you have to know when are they doing that, because not everybody does that. Right? Sometimes they're listing it around where they think it's going to sell for, sometimes they're not. You have to know the market in order to know how to advise to make an offer. So that means looking at the value, not the list price. Sometimes I just ignore the list price because, it's just the list price. Right? And there are still homes that are overpriced. So you can't just, adding 13% to one of those is not a good strategy. Right? You got to really know the market. And that means more than looking it up on Zillow, right? You understand? More than looking it up on Zillow. Pendings. Pendings are the pulse of our market. And what a pending is that the buyer made an offer, the seller accepted the offer, and it's under contract. Finding out what it's under contract for has become an important element in buying a house. In other words, contacting the agent and getting them to tell you something about what's going on, right? It also, by the way, affects appraisals because when that one closes, it becomes a comparable that you could use on your appraisal. Now, how do you find out? Well, you have to ask the listing agents. And I've been doing this for a really long time in Silicon Valley, and I know a lot of the listing agents. And I have a real estate school. There's like 2,000 people that have gone through it that are working in Silicon Valley. And I call agents up, and sometimes they and I have worked at the same office, or they took one of my classes, and they oftentimes will just tell me. Now, I'm not saying I know all the listing agents in Silicon Valley, but I know all of them that are selling lots of homes, right? I know all of them. Right? Not somebody who just listed one home and that's it every year, but the agents that are doing a lot of it, I know them. And you understand they know me, and because we've been in business so long, they're likely to tell me, whereas they might not tell somebody that they do not know. Do you understand that? They'll say, I'm not going to tell you. You just make the best, I'm not going to tell you what my pending sale is. Inspections and reports. In the old days, you would make an offer, the offer would be accepted, and then you as a buyer would hire a property inspector, a termite inspector, a roof inspector, a chimney inspector, a pool inspector, all of those things, and that's not happening as much anymore. The good news, I guess you could say, is the seller has probably bought all these reports already, right? So you save money. The other news is they're not expecting you to get any of your own. So what they want, we're going to talk about contingencies in a few minutes, but what they want you to do is sign off on all the reports and then make an offer accepting the condition of the property as it is without asking them to fix stuff, change stuff, or go get other inspections of your own. They expect that you're going to read all the disclosures and do all of your research before you make an offer. We used to have time to do this. Now it's done before they make an offer. So one of the things I do is I go through things like the natural hazard disclosure, which shows the proximity of toxic sites and other things. So I can say, hey, look at this, look at that, right? Did you know that, right? But because once you're in contract, most of the time you don't get a chance to keep doing this, right? By the way, even if you make an offer without it contingent on the property inspection, you can still do other inspections, but you can't back out because you don't like it, right? I'm going to talk more about contingencies in a minute. Now, if the seller is not, if the listing agent or the seller are not, being smart, then they don't have the inspections and reports. And then that changes the game somewhat, because if they don't give you a termite report, they really can't expect you to buy it without you getting one, right? You understand? So that they're leaving that as an opening, but smart agents aren't doing that. Smart agents have everything up front. They want you to sign it and present it with your offer, or they're not going to look at it. Write a personal letter, right? If you've got attractive children, take a picture of them. If you don't, borrow some, right? I don't know, right? And by the way, many times, a lot of these sellers, you have to understand, are getting more money than they ever thought they were going to get, right? And I've had many cases where they said, we're giving it to them because it's a family and we don't want to sell it to just an investor. I'm not kidding. Right, and they sometimes I had a client say, it wasn't the highest offer, but it was from a veteran, and he was a veteran, and he said, I'd give it to him. Why not? He's already making more money than he ever thought he was going to make. Why not? Right. So the more you can personalize it and humanize it does make a difference, and you sometimes can get the property even though your offer isn't the highest, if they like you. Offer terms. Now, it's become more common for us to allow the seller to remain in the property from 30 to 60 days after escrow closes without paying the buyer rent. This is common, right? Now, you understand this makes a huge difference to the seller because it allows the seller to close, get all their money, and go buy something someplace else and pay cash, right? So, in the old days, you would say, if I were moving to Santa Rosa and I'm selling my home in Santa Clara, we would make an offer in Santa Rosa contingent on us selling the home in Santa Clara. I mean, people don't like those offers anymore. So what we do is we sell the home in Santa Clara. And as we're approaching close of escrow, we then find the home in Santa Rosa to buy. With the seller being able to stay there for 60 days, we offer all cash up in Santa Rosa. Where is our proof of funds? It's the closing statement of the one in Santa Clara, right? Does that make it easier if you're making an all cash offer rather than a contingent offer? So sellers want this. And typically lenders will allow up to 60 days in a common normal loan. Proof of funds that can cover appraisal differences. Is it possible, given the appreciation, the house may not appraise for the amount that you've offered? You've offered $1 million. Is it possible that it will appraise for 975 or 950 or 9? So what if appraisal, by the way, typically isn't a, if you really want to buy a house, appraisal as a contingency is a problem. Because this is what I used to tell buyers back when we would make offers with appraisal as a contingency. This is what I would tell buyers. Offer any price, because you will not overpay for this home. Right? You're never going to overpay, and the reason you're not going to overpay because appraisal is a contingency, and an expert is going to go take a look at the property and give their estimate as to what it's worth, and if it isn't enough, you don't have to buy the house. Right? So we'll offer a high amount, get in contract, get the appraisal, it's lower, and then pound on the seller to lower their price. Right? You understand? That was a strategy if you were a buyer. Well, now they don't want to see appraisal as a contingency. So let's say your proof of funds, you're making a $1 million house, 20% down, that's $200,000 for a down payment. And you show that you have $200,000 and that's it. If I'm the listing agent, I'm thinking that's not enough, right? Because if it doesn't appraise for $1 million, you're going to need the difference between the appraisal and the price. And if it appraises for $950, do you have another $50? Right? And if the answer is no, then I'm thinking these people can't buy this property because I'm not sure it's going to appraise. Now, you could restructure the loan so that you could use more cash and not put down 20%, but you understand you have to be able to show that you have more money than the down payment, or you probably can't cover a difference between an appraisal. Does that make sense, Sarin? Remove the contingencies when you can. A contingency is an if. I'm willing to buy your house if I inspect it and I don't find anything I don't like. I'm willing to buy your house if I can get a loan. I'm willing to buy your house if it appraises. I'm willing to buy your house if the title is clear. I'm willing to buy the house if I don't hate the HOA documents, which you probably will, right? And so if the idea is to make an offer with as few of these contingencies as possible, because the ones that are being accepted are the ones that don't have contingencies. Right? And you would have to offer a lot more money in order to, get their attention if you have all these ifs. Any questions about this? Was that, you don't seem thrilled.
So are these price increases sustainable in this area?
They're not going to, are they sustainable in this area? See, I get asked a lot. Of course not forever. But what's happening now is they're loosened. There's a bill that might loosen up because of the property tax, transfer it to another county kind of a thing that might get some seniors to move, and they're building new homes. But what's driving our market is Apple and Google and Amazon, and that's driving our market. And even though you can, maybe there's bubbles, if you research this, you're going to find that they're not talking about Silicon Valley when they're talking about bubbles. And that's because we have a strong demand. I put in some information on the new tax law. People were saying, oh yeah, the new tax law. The December was one of the strongest months we've had in a long time. And it's really a strong December. It was really strong. And normally that's not a strong time. And it's because despite the tax law, despite all this other stuff, the demand is really high in Silicon Valley. If something happens to Apple and Google and Amazon, Facebook, who knows, right? But if something happens, then we're going to be in a different market. But as long as those companies are going strong, we're still, this is the market.
Yeah, obviously the sign outside the door says that sold, but then we know it's pending.
Right.
So what was the strategy of the listing agent? Like, is supposed to be pending or?
Well, yeah, I get asked this question by new agents all the time. Should I put up pending or put up sold? Pending, people don't really know what that means as well as sold, and so the listing agent wants to be proud of the fact that they sold it. So the neighbors will call them up and say, well, what did you get? And then they'll talk to the neighbor about, well, maybe you want to sell yours too.
And
If they mean the same thing, because once it's actually sold, that means closed, and you take your sign down. Because if you bought a house, would you want the real estate agent sign up in your yard with the word sold on it for a few weeks? Probably not, right? So the day you move in, the sign is gone. So the only time you see a pending or a sold, we call it a rider, that little thing, is while it's in escrow.
Would it be possible that it could back to the market?
It's possible that it could go back to the market if it's got contingencies. So one of the things, and there's different ways of pending. So one of the things I would do is I would look in the multiple listing service and I would see, is this a pending with contingencies, a pending without contingencies? And they code it differently, and there's a certain type of contingency that is easier to get around, and that one is also marked. So we would know what it is. And I call if it's pending with contingencies, I'll call the listing agent up and say, how strong does this look? Are you willing to take a backup offer? And sometimes they'll say, well, I think they're having trouble with the loan, right? Or I think they're having trouble with the getting accepted, the homeowner association, something, they're having trouble. And I would say, great, would you like a backup offer? And then if we can make a backup offer, when that one collapses, our offer is just accepted, right? And without it going back on the market and multiple bidding. So that's one of the strategies, is going after pendings that are still open to offers. But in a lot of our markets, they've removed the contingencies. But that was a good question. Any others? Well, I must have been thorough, I guess. I don't know.
Did we go over what your client can afford, or is that?
That's a loan thing. I don't do the loan thing.
Oh, okay.
All right. Was that good for now? Okay.